Following the Russian Revolution in 1917, the United States government, including figures like Attorney General Mitchell Palmer and President Woodrow Wilson, created a revolution of their own led by anarchists and radical leftists. This results in the time known as the First Red Scare. Fear of uprising and apprehension surrounding the end of World War I led to the Sedition Act of 1918, which outlawed any disloyal or profane language about the form of the U.S. government. Following this act, the Palmer Riots took place, which ultimately ended in the arrest and deportation of more than 4,000 foreigners, radicals, and leftists, who may or may not have been guilty of their accused crimes. This triennium of fear and unjust policies was a turning point in the heightening of immigration and deportation standards, and the involuntary setup for the Second Red Scare, among other important social and political events, impacting the lives of millions of people.
In February of 1917, the first of two revolutions took place in Russia. This forced the abdication of Tsar Nicholas II and left the country to a provisional government under Alexander Kerensky, a moderate socialist revolutionary. This unstable form of government lasted for 3 months, during which dire economic conditions caused soldiers, sailors, and workers to riot in the July days. The second and final revolution, aptly titled the Bolshevik Revolution, occurred in October 1917. The Bolsheviks were a group of leftist nationalists under Vladimir Lenin that overthrew the provisional government. Ensuring the traditional Tsarist rule, the Soviet Socialist Republic was formed under Lenin. Alongside the revolution, World War I caused thousands of immigrants from European countries to immigrate to America. These two events inspired international fear of revolt in several governments, prominently including the United States of America.
At the tail end of World War I in 1918, due to the mass number of minority groups, women workers, and job shortages, labor unions grew in size, strength, and frequency, demanding safer and fairer working wages and conditions. One of the largest strikes to take place in the United States was the Seattle General Strike. While the bulk of strikers were shipyard workers, they were joined by 25,000 people of other unions in a Seattle-wide strike. As strikes grew into riots and violent marches, the United States government became apprehensive. The events in America were beginning to reflect similar situations prior to the overthrowing of the Russian government.
Alongside unionizing, large numbers of European, African, and Russian immigrants began to flood ports and make their lives in America, causing race riots and raising the tension. The term Reds was developed to label those loyal to the Soviet flag and government. As President Wilson said to Congress about the entrance of the United States into World War I, "The world must be made safe for democracy. Its peace must be planted upon the tested foundations of political liberty, with no selfish ends to serve. We desire no conquest, no dominion." America was founded on principles of civilian rights, devoted to democracy that would protect those rights. Immigrants, along with assumed communist loyalty, posed a threat to it.
Communism is a political and economical ideology primarily influenced by Karl Marx, a German revolutionary and sociologist. Marx believed that capitalism, upon which the economy of the United States was built, ultimately resulted in citizen inequality and proposed communism as a solution. His ideal system focused on public ownership of property and wealth, where a whole community would benefit from labor. However, the application of communism in many countries fell to harsh dictatorships that would reap the rewards for themselves and control people's lives. These often ended in civil wars and revolutions. Fear of falling away from a democratic capitalist society led to the passing of the Sedition Act of 1918, outlawing slanderous, discrediting, and unlawful speech about the United States government, forcing these rioters to resume their efforts underground.
In violent response, the Galleanists launched the mail plot bombings in April through June of 1919. The Italian Galleanists were a group of violent anarchists under the direction of Luigi Galleani that carried out bombings and assassinations against anti-immigration, anti-communist, and government-loyal figures. The group would send time bombs into the mail to homes and offices. One such bomb was sent to the home of Attorney General Mitchell Palmer, inducing his crucial role in the remainder of the First Red Scare.
The nation turned to the government, demanding action and retribution against not only the Italian anarchists, but anyone who was suspected to harbor dislike for the country of democracy. Palmer was not only enraged by the act of violence against him, but had been seeking a White House position and seized the opportunity. The Attorney General teamed up with J. Edgar Hoover, head of the General Intelligence Division of the FBI, and set in motion what came to be known as the Palmer Raids. At the beginning of this act, to gain support and sympathizers, Palmer predicted a mass uprising of Italians, Reds, and other government opposers on May Day of 1920.
In November of 1919, at the behest of General Palmer, federal and local forces conducted a raid in New York City on the Union of Russian Workers. More than 200 union members were arrested under laws like the Sedition Act. A second raid later in the month revealed a false wall concealing a bomb factory. This startling discovery added integrity to Palmer's claims and fueled the fire for the next and greatest raid of the first Red Scare.
On January 2nd, 1920, across more than 30 major cities in the United States, thousands of foreign immigrants, guilty and innocent, were arrested. The number of those arrested on January 2nd and following raids is estimated to be between 5,000 and 10,000 immigrants. Palmer publicly announced the raids a success while downplaying the violence, mistreatment, and illegality of his efforts. Nearing May of 1920, arrests and deportations greatly exceeded the warrants approved by the government, though the actions were not retracted.
However, these cruelties and ever-violent raids did not go unnoticed by the general public, and many began to disagree with Palmer. Hoping to sway the people to see reason, activists such as Emma Goldman, a Russian immigrant and writer, spoke out against what she believed to be injustice. In a biased trial after her arrest in 1919, Goldman accused the government of violating one of the very foundations on which America was built, the First Amendment. Among unfair trials was the Sacco-Vanzetti case. Nicolas Sacco and Bartolomeo Vanzetti were Italian anarchists accused of robbery and the murder of two men in 1921. The case dragged on for years, finally ending in 1927, when their final appeal, just like all the others, was denied. These crimes were never traced back to them, and the jury allowed faulty evidence pertaining to the two men's background to tip the trial unfairly. Sacco and Vanzetti were executed by electric chair in 1927, never truly proven guilty. When the 1st of May, 1920 came about, and Palmer's great communist uprising did not come to pass, the people turned on him, and his credibility, power, and influence were lost, leading to the end of the period known as the First Red Scare.
In the years directly following the first Red Scare, thousands of suspected Russians were deported without any formal trial. American citizens and non-citizens alike lived with the threats and accusations of being communists and sympathizers of movements. False allegations separated families, ruined career paths for many citizens, and led to the Second Red Scare and the impacts that it brought.
The Second Red Scare took place throughout the 1940s and 50s, mainly due to the assumption that all foreigners were attempting to infiltrate the government. During the Second Red Scare, McCarthyism came into play. McCarthyism was a way of expanding Senator Joseph McCarthy's political agenda. McCarthy used the public's rational fear of spies and blew it out of proportion. By doing this, he was able to convince friends and colleagues to turn on each other, each thinking the other was a communist. The spread of McCarthyism continued a mindset of mistrust in America for years after McCarthy left office. Trailing the Second Red Scare was the Illegals Program. The Illegals Program was a network of undercover Russian sleeper agents. The Illegals Program caused mistrust between Americans, foreigners, and the government for many years to come.
After the First and Second Red Scares, immigration restrictions tightened, paling in comparison to before. Deportation rates also increased greatly, which sparked an overall fear of and through immigrants throughout America. The public had a general fear of all European immigrants because of the Illegals Program and Senator McCarthy's widespread opinion, but that hysteria quickly strengthened and created an apprehension of immigrants from areas all over the world, including South and Central America and Asia. The First Red Scare exerted influence over a century of politics, social normalities, and racism around the world, making it a vital turning point in history.